The ice started forming on my windows at 3 in the morning, and by sunrise, my entire neighborhood in Plano, Texas, looked like something out of a disaster movie. I watched through the frosted glass as power lines sagged under the weight of frozen rain, and the streetlights flickered once, twice, then went dark. My backup generator kicked on automatically 30 seconds later, exactly as it was designed to do. I had no idea that simple mechanical function would turn my life into a legal nightmare. My name is Frank Olson, and I'm a 42-year-old software engineer who works from home. More importantly, I'm the primary caregiver for my 78-year-old mother, Margaret, who requires a BiPAP machine to breathe at night and several other medical devices that keep her alive. When we moved into the Willows Creek subdivision 18 months ago, I made sure to install a proper whole house generator system. I pulled permits, hired licensed contractors, and even had the fire marshal inspect everything. It cost me nearly $15,000, but Mom's life was worth every penny. The generator hummed steadily in my backyard that morning, doing exactly what I paid for it to do. I was in the kitchen making coffee when I heard the pounding on my front door. The kind of aggressive knocking that makes your heart jump. I figured maybe it was a neighbor needing help, or perhaps someone checking if we were okay. Instead, I opened the door to find Veronica Bailey, the president of our HOA, standing on my porch with her phone pointed at my house like a weapon. "That noise is completely unacceptable," she said, not even bothering with a greeting. "You're in violation of HOA Code Section 12.4, subsection B. No generators are permitted to run before 8 a.m. or after 8 p.m. I stared at her, trying to process what I was hearing. The temperature was 19 degrees. The power was out across half the city. People were freezing in their homes, and she was worried about noise ordinances. "Veronica, my generator is keeping my mother alive," I said, trying to keep my voice calm. "Her medical equipment requires constant power. This is an emergency situation." "I don't care if you're running a hospital in there," she snapped. "Rules are rules. The HOA covenant is legally binding. You signed it when you purchased your home. Turn it off immediately or I'll be forced to take action." She was wearing a puffy winter coat and designer boots, her blonde hair perfectly styled despite the early hour and catastrophic weather. Behind her, I could see her house about 3 doors down, also dark. Everyone on the street was without power except me. "I'm not turning it off," I said firmly. "My mother's life is more important than your noise complaint. It's an emergency situation, and I have every legal right to run this generator." Her eyes narrowed. "We'll see about that. I'm calling the police." "You're creating a public disturbance, and you're in clear violation of neighborhood covenants. Don't say I didn't warn you." She turned and marched back toward her house, already dialing on her phone. I closed the door and leaned against it, my mind racing. I walked back to Mom's room on the first floor, where she was still sleeping peacefully. The BiPAP machine maintaining its steady rhythm, the oxygen concentrator humming quietly in the corner. A small heater kept her room at a comfortable temperature. Without the generator, she'd have maybe 20 minutes before things got critical. I called my lawyer, Daniel Preston, but it went straight to voicemail. I left a message explaining the situation and asking him to call me back as soon as possible. Then I made coffee and waited, watching out the window as the ice continued to accumulate on everything it touched. Trees bowed under the weight. Car windshields were thick with frozen sheets. This wasn't just a winter storm. This was a genuine crisis. 20 minutes later, a Plano Police Department cruiser pulled up in front of my house. I watched as a uniformed officer got out, spoke briefly with Veronica, who had emerged from her house again, then walked up to my door. I opened it before he could knock. Good morning, sir. I'm Officer James Chen. I received a complaint about a noise disturbance. Are you running a generator? I am, I said. And before you ask me to turn it off, I need you to understand that it's powering life support equipment for my mother. She has severe respiratory issues and requires constant power to her medical devices. Officer Chen's expression shifted immediately from official concern to understanding. Can you show me? Absolutely. Please come in. I led him through the house to Mom's room. She was awake now, sitting up in bed and looking concerned. The officer took in the BiPAP machine, the oxygen concentrator, the small portable defibrillator on the nightstand, and the various monitors tracking her vitals. "Madam, how are you doing this morning?" he asked gently. "I'd be a lot better if people would stop trying to kill me," Mom said dryly. She's never been one to mince words. Officer Chen smiled slightly and turned back to me. "Sir, do you have documentation from her doctors regarding these medical needs?" "I do. Give me just a moment." I went to my office and retrieved the folder I kept with all of Mom's medical paperwork. Doctor's notes, prescriptions, letters of medical necessity for the equipment, everything. I'd learned to keep it all organized after years of dealing with insurance companies. I handed the folder to Officer Chen, who reviewed it carefully. "This is pretty clear-cut," he said. "Your mother requires this equipment to maintain her health and safety. The generator is a medical necessity. I'm going to document this in my report, so I don't have to turn it off." "No, sir, you absolutely do not. In fact, under Texas law, you have the right to maintain power to medical equipment during emergencies. The HOA covenant cannot override state law regarding life-sustaining medical equipment. I'll explain this to Miss Bailey." Relief flooded through me. "Thank you, officer. I really appreciate you being reasonable about this. Just doing my job. Your setup here looks professional, by the way. Is it properly permitted?" "Yes, sir. I have all the permits, inspection certificates, everything. I can show you those too if you need." "That won't be necessary. I can tell this is a quality installation. Stay warm, folks." I walked Officer Chen back to the front door and watched through the window as he approached Veronica, who was still standing outside, arms crossed, waiting for vindication. I couldn't hear the conversation, but I could see her face getting redder by the second as he explained the situation. She gestured wildly toward my house, clearly arguing with him. He remained calm, professional, and eventually walked back to his patrol car and drove away. I thought that would be the end of it. I was very wrong. 2 hours later, Veronica was back at my door with 2 other members of the HOA board, Patricia Dunn and Sharon Mills, both women in their 50s who seemed to share Veronica's talent for finding problems where none existed. "We're here to formally notify you that you're in violation of HOA covenants," Veronica announced, thrusting a printed letter at me. "You have 24 hours to comply, or we'll be filing for an injunction to force compliance. We'll also be assessing daily fines of $500 until the violation is corrected." I took the letter and scanned it quickly. It cited the noise ordinance section she'd mentioned earlier, and added a few other alleged violations, including installation of equipment without HOA Architectural Committee approval and creating a public nuisance during a declared emergency. "This is insane," I said. "A police officer was literally just here and confirmed that I'm legally entitled to run this generator. My mother needs it to live." "We're very sorry about your mother's situation," Patricia said, though her tone suggested she was anything but sorry. "However, personal circumstances don't exempt residents from following the rules everyone else has to follow." "What rules is everyone else following? There's no power. Everyone would be running generators if they had them." "But they don't have them," Veronica said. Because they followed the proper procedures and got approval before installation. You did not. This generator was never approved by the architectural committee. I didn't know I needed HOA approval. I got all the city permits, the fire marshal inspection, everything the city required. Ignorance of the HOA covenants isn't an excuse, Sharon chimed in. You received a full copy of the covenants when you closed on your house. It's your responsibility to read and understand them. I tried to remember the closing day 18 months ago. There had been so many documents to sign, so many pages to initial. My realtor had assured me the HOA was pretty laid back and rarely enforces anything. I'd been more focused on getting Mom settled into a comfortable living situation than reading hundreds of pages of subdivision rules. Even if that's true, I said carefully, you can't seriously expect me to turn off life-sustaining medical equipment because of an HOA rule. That's not legal. Officer Chen confirmed it. Officer Chen doesn't interpret HOA law, Veronica said. Our attorney does. And we've already spoken with him this morning. He's assured us we have the legal authority to enforce our covenants. You'll be hearing from him shortly. They left before I could respond, leaving me standing in my doorway holding a letter threatening legal action against me for keeping my mother alive. I called my lawyer again and finally reached him this time. Daniel, I need help. My HOA is threatening to sue me for running my generator during the power outage. Slow down, Frank. Tell me everything. I explained the whole situation, from Veronica's first appearance that morning to the formal violation notice I just received. Daniel listened carefully, asking occasional questions. Okay, he said when I finished. First, don't panic. They're on extremely shaky legal ground here. Texas has pretty strong protections for medically necessary equipment, especially during declared emergencies. The governor declared a state of emergency for this ice storm last night, which gives you additional protections. Second, document everything. Take photos of your generator, your mother's equipment, the weather conditions, everything. Save all communications with the HOA. Third, write them a formal response citing the medical necessity and referencing Texas Health and Safety Code Section 168.003. I'll email you the specific language to use. Fourth, we may need to file for a temporary restraining order against the HOA if they try to physically interfere with your generator. Can they really fine me $500 a day? They can try, but they won't succeed. Any court would rule in your favor given the circumstances. The problem is, HOA litigation can get expensive even when you win. These cases can drag on for months or years. I don't care about the money. I care about keeping my mother alive. I understand. Let me make some calls. In the meantime, keep that generator running and document everything. I spent the rest of the morning doing exactly that. I took photos of Mom's equipment, screenshots of the weather alerts, pictures of the ice-covered neighborhood. I documented the time the power went out and when the generator activated. I pulled out all my permits and inspection certificates and scanned them into my computer. If this was going to be a legal battle, I'd be prepared. The power stayed out all day. By afternoon, the temperature had dropped to 15 degrees, and I could hear generators starting up at a few other houses in the neighborhood. Apparently, when it got cold enough, people decided HOA rules could take a back seat to not freezing to death. I wondered if Veronica would be going door to door threatening all of them too. Around 4 in the afternoon, I got an email from someone named Robert Hutchins identifying himself as the HOA's attorney. The email was a formal demand that I cease and desist all violations of Willows Creek HOA covenants immediately, and that I submit a full architectural review application for the generator installation. It also stated that the HOA board would be voting on Friday to authorize legal action against me if I didn't comply. I forwarded it to Daniel, who called me back within 10 minutes. "This guy's a hack," Daniel said. "Robert Hutchins. I've dealt with him before. He makes his living sending threatening letters to homeowners on behalf of HOAs. He rarely actually files anything because he knows most of his cases would get laughed out of court. He's counting on you being scared enough to comply." Well, it's not working. Mom's equipment stays on. Good. I'm drafting a response now. We're going to make it very clear that they're treading on dangerous legal ground. Threatening to cut power to life-sustaining medical equipment could constitute criminal endangerment. I'm going to spell that out for Mr. Hutchins in very simple terms. That evening, Mom was in good spirits despite everything happening. I made us dinner on the gas stove, one of the reasons I'd insisted on gas appliances when we moved in. We ate by lamplight at the kitchen table, the generator humming steadily outside. "You know," Mom said, "I survived the Depression, 3 wars, 2 bad marriages, and cancer. I'll be damned if some suburban housewife with nothing better to do is going to be what takes me out." I laughed despite the stress. "That's the spirit. I mean it, Frank. Don't you let these people push you around. You did everything right. You take good care of me. That woman is just miserable and wants everyone else to be miserable too. The problem is she has the law on her side, or at least she thinks she does. Does she, though? From what that nice police officer said, it sounds like she doesn't have a leg to stand on. Officer Chen said I'm in the right under state law, but HOA covenants are civil contracts. They can be enforced separately from state law. It's complicated. Nothing complicated about it. My equipment needs power. You're providing power. End of story." If only it were that simple. The next morning, the ice had gotten worse. The entire city looked like it had been dipped in glass. The news was reporting that power wouldn't be restored for at least 3 to 5 days. Hundreds of thousands of people were without electricity. Emergency shelters were opening, but they were filling up fast. The governor was on TV urging people to check on their neighbors and stay off the roads. My generator kept humming. I checked it every few hours, refilling the propane tank as needed. I'd stocked up on extra propane tanks precisely for situations like this. The system was running perfectly. Around 10 in the morning, Veronica appeared again, this time with a man I didn't recognize. He was holding what looked like some kind of measuring device. "This is Greg Thompson from our HOA management company," Veronica announced when I opened the door. "He's here to take decibel readings of your generator noise." "You're kidding." "We don't kid about covenant violations." "Mr. Thompson, please proceed." Greg looked uncomfortable but walked around to my backyard where the generator was located. Veronica stayed on my porch, watching me like she expected me to interfere. I just stood there, incredulous. "You realize how crazy this is, right?" I said. "People are literally freezing to death across the state, and you're measuring noise levels. The law is the law. If we don't enforce our covenants, we could be sued by other homeowners who feel their property values are being damaged by noise pollution." Property values. "Veronica, have you looked outside? There's ice everywhere. The entire state is in crisis mode, which is exactly why it's important to maintain order and standards. Otherwise, everything falls apart." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Her worldview was so narrow, so rigidly focused on rules and regulations, that she literally couldn't see the absurdity of what she was doing. It was like talking to a robot programmed with HOA covenants instead of common sense. Greg returned a few minutes later and showed Veronica his device. "It's reading about 75 decibels at the property line," he said, And what's the HOA limit? Veronica asked. 65 decibels during daytime hours, 55 at night. There we go. Another violation. Mr. Olson, you're now in violation of noise ordinances, architectural approval requirements, and exceeding permitted decibel levels. The fines are adding up quickly. I suggest you turn off that generator before this gets more expensive. I suggest you leave my property before I call the police for harassment, I replied. Her eyes went cold. You can't intimidate me. I'm doing my job as HOA president. I'll see you in court. She and Greg left, and I immediately called Daniel again. They're measuring noise levels, I told him. They're building a case. Let them. Every piece of documentation they create just proves that they're prioritizing noise complaints over medical necessity. It's going to look terrible in front of a judge. How's your mother doing? She's fine. Comfortable. The equipment is running perfectly. Good. Keep it that way. I'm finishing up the response letter now. We're going to shut this down. But things got worse before they got better. That afternoon, my internet went down. Not from the storm, but because it had been disconnected at the junction box. I went outside to check and found that someone had physically unplugged the cable connection to my house. My security cameras caught the footage. Veronica's husband, Michael Bailey, approaching the utility box at the side of my house and disconnecting the cables. I called the police again. This time, a different officer responded, Officer Sandra Martinez. I showed her the security footage. That's pretty clear-cut vandalism and destruction of property, she said. Do you want to press charges? I want them to stop harassing me. I want to keep my generator running without being threatened every day. I want my mother to be safe. I understand. Let me talk to some people. This HOA situation is getting out of hand. She left, and I reconnected my internet cables. I sent the security footage to Daniel, who was thrilled in a grim, lawyerly way. This is perfect, he said. Not perfect that it happened, but perfect evidence. They're now committing actual crimes in their effort to enforce HOA rules. This strengthens our position considerably. I'm going to send an updated letter making it very clear that any further interference with your property or utilities will result in immediate criminal charges. That evening, I got a call from my next-door neighbor, Tom Richards. Tom was a retired firefighter in his 60s who'd been friendly but distant since we'd moved in. We'd waved to each other while taking out trash, but had never really talked much. Frank, I just wanted you to know that I think what the HOA is doing to you is complete nonsense, he said. I've lived in this neighborhood for 15 years, and Veronica has always been on a power trip, but this is next-level crazy. If you need anything at all, let me know. Witnesses, statements, whatever. I appreciate that, Tom, really. I mean it. My wife had to use an oxygen concentrator for the last 3 years of her life. I know how important that equipment is. Nobody should be messing with that, HOA rules or not. Thank you. That means a lot. After I hung up, I felt a little less alone in this fight. It was easy to feel like I was going crazy when Veronica and her board members kept insisting that I was the one being unreasonable. Having someone validate that this situation was absurd helped more than I expected. The power stayed out through Thursday and into Friday. My generator kept running. I received another email from Robert Hutchins, the HOA attorney, informing me that the board had voted to authorize legal action and that I should expect to be served with papers shortly. I forwarded it to Daniel and went about my day. Friday afternoon, a process server showed up and handed me a formal complaint. The HOA was suing me for breach of covenants, seeking an injunction to force me to turn off the generator, and demanding payment of accumulated fines that now totaled $3,500. They were also seeking attorney's fees and court costs. I called Daniel immediately. I just got served. I expected as much. Don't worry about it. We're going to file our response and counterclaim. You're going to countersue them for harassment, emotional distress, and attempted interference with medical care. We're also going to seek attorney's fees. And given that we have video evidence of Michael Bailey vandalizing your property, we're going to make this very expensive for them. How long will this take? Could be months. But we'll file for an immediate temporary restraining order to prevent them from interfering with your generator while the case proceeds. Given the medical necessity, I'm confident we'll get it. What if the judge sides with them? Frank, no judge is going to order you to turn off your mother's life support equipment because your generator is too loud. That's not going to happen. Worst case scenario, they might order you to install sound dampening or move the generator to a different location, but even that's unlikely given the emergency circumstances. Okay, I trust you. Good. In the meantime, document everything. Every interaction with Veronica or any board member, every threat, everything. The weekend was relatively quiet. The ice began to melt on Saturday as temperatures climbed back into the 30s. Power started coming back on in some parts of the city, though our neighborhood was still dark. My generator continued its steady hum, keeping Mom safe and comfortable. Sunday afternoon, Tom knocked on my door. "Hey Frank, you got a minute? There's something you should know." "Sure, come in." We sat in the living room and Tom looked uncomfortable. "So, I went to Veronica's house yesterday to tell her I thought she was out of line with this whole generator thing," he said. "It didn't go well. She told me that if I sided with you, she'd find violations at my house too. Then she said something really weird. She said this wasn't really about your generator being too loud. It was about teaching people that they can't just do whatever they want without asking permission first." "What?" "Yeah. She said, and I'm quoting here, if Frank gets away with installing a major piece of equipment without approval, then everyone will think they can do whatever they want." Where does it end? Next thing you know, people will be building sheds and garages without asking permission, and then the whole neighborhood falls apart. I got the feeling this is personal for her. Like she's using your situation to make a point to everyone else. That's insane. It's power trip nonsense is what it is. But I thought you should know, this isn't about noise or rules. This is about control. After Tom left, I thought about what he'd said. It made a disturbing kind of sense. Veronica had been HOA president for 6 years, according to the neighborhood newsletter I'd received when we moved in. 6 years of having authority over 247 households, making decisions about what color people could paint their shutters, whether they could have basketball hoops, how tall their grass could be. That kind of petty power could warp a person's perspective. Monday morning, the power finally came back on in our neighborhood. I watched through the window as streetlights flickered to life and porch lights began glowing up and down the block. I could turn off the generator now, but I didn't want to, on principle. My mother needed backup power capability and I'd proven the system worked. I wasn't going to let the HOA intimidate me into shutting it down. I called Daniel to update him. "Leave it running for now," he advised. "We're still in litigation." Turning it off might look like an admission that they were right to complain. Plus, your mother still needs it as backup in case of another outage. That's what I was thinking. I'm filing our response and counterclaim today. This is going to get interesting. That afternoon, I received a hand-delivered letter from Veronica. Not an email, not a formal legal document, just a handwritten note on HOA letterhead. "Dear Mr. Olson," it read, "now that power has been restored, there is no longer any emergency justification for running your generator. You are hereby ordered to cease operation immediately. Failure to comply will result in additional fines and potential further legal action. The board remains willing to work with you to resolve this situation if you demonstrate a willingness to follow proper procedures going forward. Sincerely, Veronica Bailey, HOA President. The tone was different from her previous communications. Less aggressive, almost conciliatory. I showed it to Mom, who snorted in disgust. She's trying to seem reasonable now because she knows she screwed up, Mom said. Don't fall for it. I called Daniel and read him the letter. It's a trap, he said immediately. If you turn off the generator now, she'll claim that proves it wasn't medically necessary after all. Don't touch it. Let it keep running. We're going to court anyway, might as well maintain our position. But the power is back on. I don't actually need it running right now. Doesn't matter. The principle stands. Your mother needs backup power capability. The generator is a permanent installation for that purpose. Whether it's actively running at any given moment isn't relevant to the legal question of whether you had the right to install it and use it during emergencies. So the generator kept running, a steady background hum that became almost comforting. It meant Mom was safe. It meant I was standing my ground. Tuesday afternoon, things escalated again. I came home from a quick grocery run to find Veronica, Patricia, Sharon, and two men I didn't recognize standing in my driveway. One of the men was taking photos of my house and generator. The other was writing notes on a clipboard. What's going on here? I demanded. HOA compliance inspection, Veronica said coolly. This is Roger Mills from the Architectural Committee and James Patterson, our neighborhood compliance officer. We're documenting all code violations on your property. You can't just come onto my property without permission. Actually, the HOA covenants grant us the right to conduct inspections with reasonable notice. We sent you an email this morning at 8 a.m. It's now 2 p.m. 6 hours is reasonable notice. I pulled out my phone and checked my email. Sure enough, there was a message sent at 8:04 a.m. informing me of an inspection scheduled for 2 o'clock p.m. I'd been at the grocery store and hadn't seen it. This is harassment, I said. This is enforcement, Veronica corrected. Now we've identified several violations so far. Your lawn has patches of dead grass. You have a small crack in your driveway. Your gutters need cleaning. And of course, the unauthorized generator installation. We're preparing a comprehensive violation report. My lawn has dead grass because we just had an ice storm. Covenant Section 8.2 requires all lawns to be maintained in green, healthy condition year-round. Dead grass is explicitly prohibited. This was beyond absurd now. They were nitpicking every tiny imperfection they could find, building a case that I was a problem homeowner who refused to follow any rules. It was a pattern of harassment designed to overwhelm me with violations and fines. I called the police again. Officer Chen responded, the same officer who'd confirmed my generator was legal during the ice storm. They're on my property conducting what they call a compliance inspection, I explained. I didn't give them permission to be here. Officer Chen spoke with Veronica, reviewed the HOA covenants on his phone, and ultimately concluded that the HOA did have the right to conduct inspections under the terms I'd agreed to when buying the house. However, he added, looking directly at Veronica, continued inspections beyond what's reasonable could constitute harassment. I'd suggest you complete your inspection today and give Mr. Olson some space going forward. We're just doing our jobs, officer, Veronica said sweetly. After everyone left, I sat down and calculated the fines they were threatening. The generator violations alone were now up to $7,000. Add in the dead grass, the driveway crack, and the gutters, and they were claiming I owed the HOA nearly $8,000 total. It was extortion disguised as rule enforcement. That evening, I got a call from Daniel with good news. "We've got a hearing scheduled for next Monday for the temporary restraining order," he said. "Judge Catherine Morrison. She's fair-minded and practical. I think she'll see through the HOA's nonsense pretty quickly. A week from now. Best I could do. The courts are backlogged from the ice storm, a lot of emergency cases, but this gives us time to prepare. I need you to put together a timeline of everything that's happened. Every interaction with Veronica, every threat, every fine notice. Also, get a statement from your mother's doctor confirming the medical necessity of her equipment." "I can do that." "Good. We're going to bury them with evidence. By the time we're done, the judge is going to wonder why this case even exists." I spent the next several days preparing. I created a detailed timeline with dates, times, and descriptions of every interaction with the HOA. I collected all the violation notices, fine assessments, and threatening emails. I got a notarized statement from Mom's pulmonologist explaining exactly why continuous power to her medical equipment was life-critical. I gathered my permits, inspection certificates, and installation records for the generator. I compiled weather reports and news articles about the ice storm and power outages. The more documentation I assembled, the clearer the pattern became. The HOA wasn't enforcing rules. They were targeting me specifically because I dared to install something without asking their permission first. Every subsequent action they'd taken was designed to punish me for that original offense. Thursday afternoon, I received a certified letter from Robert Hutchins, the HOA's attorney. It was a settlement offer. They dropped the lawsuit and forgive all fines if I agreed to remove the generator within 30 days, pay $2,000 to cover their attorney's fees, and sign a statement agreeing not to install any future equipment without prior HOA approval. I called Daniel immediately. "They're offering to settle." "Let me guess. You remove the generator and pay them money." "Exactly." "Turn it down. They're trying to settle because they know they're going to lose in court. This offer is them trying to salvage something from a losing position. Tell them to pound sand." "You're sure?" "Frank, you've done nothing wrong. You installed a permitted generator to power life-saving medical equipment. You used it during an emergency. Everything you did was legal, reasonable, and necessary. Do not let them bully you into removing equipment your mother needs to stay alive." I emailed Robert Hutchins declining the settlement offer. His response came back within an hour. "Your decision to reject this reasonable offer will be noted by the court. The HOA will pursue maximum available penalties when we prevail." Bring it on, I thought. Saturday morning, Tom knocked on my door again. "Hey, Frank, I've been talking to some other neighbors. A bunch of us are pretty unhappy with how Veronica is handling this situation. We're thinking about calling a special HOA meeting to vote her out as president. Would you be interested in attending?" "Definitely." "When?" "We're still organizing it. Need to get 20% of homeowners to sign a petition to call the meeting. Got about 15% so far. Should have enough by early next week. Just wanted to give you a heads up." This was an interesting development. I'd assumed most of the neighborhood either supported Veronica or didn't care. Apparently, I was wrong. People were paying attention and they didn't like what they were seeing. Monday morning arrived, the day of the hearing. I put on my best suit and met Daniel at the Collin County Courthouse in McKinney. The building was an impressive modern structure, all glass and steel, efficient and intimidating. We went through security and found our assigned courtroom on the 3rd floor. Veronica was already there with Robert Hutchins. She was wearing a navy blue suit and had her hair pulled back severely, trying to look professional and authoritative. Hutchins was a short man in his 50s with gray hair and an expensive suit. He had the kind of face that suggested he spent most of his time arguing with people. Judge Morrison took the bench at exactly 9 a.m. She was a black woman in her early 60s with short natural hair and reading glasses that she peered over as she reviewed the case file. "All right," she said. "I've read the pleadings and the motions. This is a hearing on the plaintiff's request for a temporary restraining order to prevent the defendant HOA from interfering with a residential generator installation. Mr. Preston, you represent the plaintiff." "Yes, Your Honor," Daniel stood. "Frank Olson is my client." "Mr. Hutchins, you're representing the Willows Creek HOA?" "Correct, Your Honor." "Let's start with you, Mr. Preston. Explain why your client needs a restraining order." Daniel stood and methodically presented our case. He explained Mom's medical condition and the equipment she required. He showed the judge documentation from her doctors. He presented the permits and inspections for the generator. He showed the timeline of the ice storm and power outages. Then he showed the pattern of harassment from the HOA, the threats, the fines, the violation notices, the settlement demand. Finally, he showed the security camera footage of Michael Bailey vandalizing my internet connection. "Your Honor, this isn't a case about HOA rules or community standards," Daniel concluded. "This is a case about an HOA president who's abusing her authority to harass a homeowner who dared to prioritize his mother's life over asking permission to install life-saving equipment. Mr. Olson did everything legally required by the city and state. The HOA is now attempting to retroactively punish him for not also asking their permission, despite the clear medical necessity of the installation." Judge Morrison turned to Hutchins. "Your response." Hutchins stood and launched into an argument about the sanctity of HOA covenants and the importance of architectural control. He claimed that allowing homeowners to install equipment without approval would lead to chaos. He argued that I should have known to seek HOA approval in addition to city permits. He presented photos of my dead lawn and cracked driveway as evidence that I was a problem homeowner who didn't respect community standards. "Your Honor, this isn't about medical equipment," Hutchins argued. "This is about a homeowner who believes rules don't apply to him. If we allow Mr. Olson to ignore our covenants, what message does that send to the other 246 families in our community?" Judge Morrison removed her glasses and looked directly at Hutchins. "Counselor, I've reviewed the timeline here. Your client, Miss Bailey, called the police on Mr. Olson's generator during an ice storm when people were literally dying from cold exposure across the state. When the officer confirmed the generator was powering life support equipment, your client then threatened Mr. Olson with fines. When that didn't work, her husband vandalized Mr. Olson's property. Now you're in my courtroom arguing that HOA covenants are more important than keeping a 78-year-old woman alive. Is that an accurate summary?" Hutchins hesitated. "Your Honor, it's more nuanced than that." "I don't think it is." "Mr. Preston, do you have the doctor's statement regarding the medical necessity?" Daniel handed up the notarized letter from Mom's pulmonologist. Judge Morrison read it carefully. "This is very clear. Mrs. Olson requires constant power to multiple medical devices. Loss of power could result in serious injury or death within minutes. Mr. Olson installed a properly permitted generator to ensure continuous power. He used it during an emergency exactly as intended." She looked at Hutchins. "What am I missing here? Why are we even having this hearing?" "The HOA has a legitimate interest in maintaining community standards, Your Honor. Mr. Olson could have sought approval before installation. During a medical emergency, His mother moved in with him. She needed equipment. He installed a backup power system. The sequence of events seems entirely reasonable to me. Judge Morrison flipped through more pages. I also see here that you're seeking nearly $8,000 in fines from Mr. Olson, including fines for dead grass caused by a historic ice storm. Are you serious? The covenants are clear about maintenance standards. The covenants don't override common sense, counselor. Grass dies in ice storms. That's not a violation. That's weather. She looked at her notes again. I'm granting the temporary restraining order. The HOA is prohibited from interfering with Mr. Olson's generator in any way, including but not limited to demanding its removal, assessing fines related to its installation or operation, or conducting further compliance inspections focused on this issue. Furthermore, all fines assessed against Mr. Olson to date are suspended pending resolution of the underlying lawsuit. Miss Bailey and all HOA board members are ordered to cease contact with Mr. Olson except through counsel. Any violations of this order will result in contempt charges. Your Honor, Hutchins began, but Judge Morrison cut him off. I'm not done. I'm also ordering the HOA to pay Mr. Olson's attorney's fees for this hearing. The lawsuit should never have been filed, and bringing this matter before the court during the aftermath of a natural disaster, when the court's resources should be focused on genuine emergencies, was a waste of judicial resources. Mr. Preston, submit your fee statement within 10 days. Thank you, Your Honor, Daniel said. Veronica looked like she'd been slapped. Her face was red and she was whispering furiously with Hutchins. I felt a wave of relief so strong I almost got dizzy. We're adjourned, Judge Morrison said. And Miss Bailey, if you're in my courtroom again over something like this, I won't be nearly as patient. Use some common sense and stop harassing your neighbors over nonsense. Outside the courtroom, Daniel was grinning. That went even better than I expected. Judge Morrison destroyed them. This is basically over, Frank. They're not going to keep pursuing this after getting slapped down that hard. So I can keep my generator. You can keep your generator. The restraining order stays in place until the lawsuit is resolved, and I guarantee you Hutchins is going to be advising them to drop the lawsuit immediately. They have no case. They know it now, and they just got ordered to pay your legal fees. Continuing this would be throwing good money after bad. We walked out of the courthouse into bright sunshine. The ice was completely gone now, the weather had warmed into the 50s, and life in Plano was returning to normal. Except nothing felt quite normal anymore. I'd been through a bizarre legal battle over my right to keep my mother alive, and while I'd won, the experience had left me shaken. I drove home and told Mom what had happened. She hugged me tight. I knew you'd win, she said. These people are bullies, and bullies usually back down when someone stands up to them. I couldn't have done it without Daniel. You could have. You're stronger than you think, Frank, but I'm glad you had a good lawyer anyway. That evening, Tom knocked on my door with a clipboard. Got the signatures we needed, he said. Special HOA meeting is scheduled for next Thursday at 7 p.m. We're voting on removing Veronica as president and recalling the entire board. Thought you'd want to know. I'll be there. Good. Bring your lawyer if you can. Things might get contentious. Thursday arrived, and the special meeting was held at the community center building near the neighborhood entrance. The room was packed with at least 100 people, way more than usually attended HOA meetings, according to Tom. Veronica sat at a table at the front with Patricia and Sharon, looking defensive and angry. Daniel came with me, sitting quietly in the back row as an observer. The meeting was called to order by Martin Fletcher, a retired accountant who'd organized the recall petition. "We're here tonight to vote on removing the current board and electing new leadership," Martin announced. "But first, I think we should hear from both sides. Veronica, would you like to explain your actions regarding the Olson generator situation?" Veronica stood, clearly prepared with a speech. "Everything I did was in accordance with my duties as HOA president," she said. "Mr. Olson installed a major piece of equipment without seeking approval. The architectural committee exists to maintain property values and community standards. If we don't enforce our rules, the neighborhood will deteriorate. I was doing what I was elected to do. You tried to force a man to turn off his mother's life support equipment?" Someone shouted from the audience. "That's not how I would characterize it," Veronica said. "The generator could have been turned off once power was restored." "The judge didn't agree with you," Martin said. "In fact, the judge ordered the HOA to pay Mr. Olson's legal fees and called the lawsuit a waste of court resources. That's pretty damning." The judge didn't understand the full context of HOA governance. "The judge understood that you were harassing a neighbor over nonsense," Tom spoke up. "I was there when you admitted to me that this wasn't really about the generator being too loud. It was about making an example out of Frank to scare everyone else into compliance. That's abuse of power." Murmurs of agreement rippled through the crowd. Veronica's face flushed red. "That's taken out of context," she said. "I'd like to say something." I stood up. All eyes turned to me. "I moved to this neighborhood because it seemed like a nice place to live with my mother. I installed a generator because Mom needs medical equipment to stay alive. I got all the permits, hired licensed contractors, and did everything legally required. I had no idea I was supposed to also ask the HOA for permission, but honestly, even if I had known, I probably wouldn't have. Mom's life isn't subject to architectural committee approval. When the ice storm hit and the power went out, my generator did exactly what it was supposed to do. It kept Mom alive. Instead of being grateful that one of your neighbors had the foresight to prepare for emergencies, Veronica called the cops on me. When that didn't work, she threatened me with fines. When that didn't work, her husband vandalized my property. Then she sued me. All of this because I didn't ask her permission first. That's not leadership, that's tyranny." The room erupted in applause. Veronica looked stunned. Patricia and Sharon were both staring at the table. The vote was held 30 minutes later. By a margin of 82 to 15, the board was recalled and a new slate of officers was elected. Tom became the new president. Martin became vice president. A woman named Linda Chen became treasurer. The old guard was out. After the meeting, dozens of people came up to shake my hand and apologize for what I'd been through. Several admitted they'd been afraid to speak up before because they didn't want to become Veronica's next target. "She fined me $300 because my house numbers were the wrong shade of brass," one man told me. "I had to repaint them even though they were only 2 years old. She made me remove a bird feeder because it wasn't in the approved locations," a woman said. "I had to get an exception in writing just to feed birds in my own yard." The stories went on and on. Veronica had been drunk on power for years, and people had been too intimidated or apathetic to do anything about it. My situation had finally pushed things too far, and the neighborhood had collectively decided enough was enough. 2 weeks later, Robert Hutchins sent Daniel a letter formally dismissing the HOA's lawsuit against me. All fines were withdrawn. There was no apology, no admission of wrongdoing, just a terse legal notification that the matter was closed. "Can we go after them for malicious prosecution?" I asked Daniel. "We could, but honestly, I'd advise against it. You won. They lost. You'd spend months in litigation over what would likely be a modest financial settlement. Better to just move on with your life." He was probably right, but part of me wanted Veronica to face consequences for what she'd put me through. Then again, she'd been humiliated in court and removed from the HOA board. Maybe that was consequence enough. The new HOA board held its first meeting in March. One of their first actions was to amend the covenants to explicitly allow generators and other equipment necessary for medical care or emergency preparedness, with only minimal notification requirements. They also established a process for appealing fines and a limit on how much could be assessed for minor violations. We're trying to make this neighborhood feel like a community again instead of a police state, Tom told me after the meeting. Veronica forgot that we're all just people trying to live our lives. HOAs are supposed to help maintain property values and organize community events, not terrorize homeowners over every little thing. Life slowly returned to normal. Mom's health remained stable with her equipment running reliably on grid power, with the generator standing ready as backup. I never did shut it off completely, running it for a few hours each week to keep it maintained. Every time I heard that steady hum, I thought about how close I'd come to being forced to turn it off, and how different things might have been if I hadn't fought back. In April, I got an unexpected knock on my door. It was Veronica. She looked different, older somehow, without the armor of authority she'd worn for so long. "I owe you an apology," she said quietly. "I was wrong, about everything. I got so caught up in enforcing rules that I forgot why the rules existed in the first place. I could have killed your mother over my ego. I'm sorry." I stood there surprised. This wasn't what I'd expected. "Why are you telling me this now?" I asked. "I've been in therapy, trying to understand why I acted the way I did." My therapist helped me see that I was using the HOA position to feel important, to feel like I mattered. I turned it into something toxic. I turned into someone I don't like very much. She looked down at her hands. "I know saying sorry doesn't fix anything, but I needed to say it anyway. I'm sorry, Frank. Your mother deserves to be safe. You did the right thing fighting me. Thank you for saying that. It means something." She nodded and walked away. I watched her go, feeling a strange mix of vindication and sadness. She'd been wrong, terribly wrong, but she was also just a person who'd let a small amount of power corrupt her judgment. There wasn't anything to do but forgive and move forward. Summer came, hot and humid as always in Texas. Mom's health improved with the warmer weather. She started spending time on our back patio, reading books and enjoying the garden I'd planted. The generator sat quietly in the corner of the yard, no longer a source of conflict, just a piece of equipment doing its job. In June, the new HOA board organized a neighborhood block party. It was the first community event in years that felt genuinely fun instead of obligatory. People brought food to share. Kids ran around playing. Neighbors who'd barely spoken before were laughing together. Tom gave a short speech thanking everyone for giving the new board a chance to make things better. "We're a community," he said. "That means we look out for each other. It means we prioritize people over rules. It means we remember that our neighbors are human beings, not violations waiting to happen. I think we're headed in a good direction." Later that evening, as the party was winding down, Tom pulled me aside. "I never properly thanked you," he said. "If you hadn't stood up to Veronica, nothing would have changed. You took the hit that needed to be taken, and the whole neighborhood is better for it. I didn't have much choice. Mom needed that generator. You had a choice about how to respond. You could have backed down, removed the generator, paid the fines. Plenty of people would have. But you fought back and you won. That matters." I thought about that as I walked back to my house that night, Mom's hand tucked into my arm for support. Had I really had a choice? Maybe not about keeping the generator running, that was never negotiable. But I'd had choices about how to handle the conflict, about whether to fight or capitulate, about whether to let the HOA intimidate me into silence. The legal bills had been expensive, even with the court-ordered fee reimbursement. The stress had been real. There'd been days when I'd questioned whether it was worth it, whether I should just give up and move somewhere without an HOA. But looking back now, months later, I was glad I'd fought. Not just for myself, but for the principle of the thing. Nobody should have to ask permission to keep their family members alive. In August, I got a letter from the city of Plano. They were updating their emergency preparedness guidelines and wanted to feature my generator installation as an example of proper planning for residents with medical needs. Would I be willing to let them photograph my setup and interview me for their website? I agreed, and a few weeks later, a city inspector and a photographer came by. They documented my system, took detailed photos, and interviewed me about why I'd installed it and how it had performed during the ice storm. "We're trying to encourage more residents to think about backup power," the inspector explained. "Especially people with medical equipment or elderly family members. Your installation is perfect, everything done by the book. It's exactly what we want people to do." The irony wasn't lost on me. The same installation that my HOA had tried to force me to remove was now being held up by the city as a model for others to follow. The article went live on the city's website in September, complete with photos of my generator and a quote from me about the importance of emergency preparedness. Tom sent it to every homeowner in the neighborhood with a note. "This is why we updated our covenants to allow this kind of equipment. Frank did everything right, and we should be proud to have him as a neighbor." Life continued. Seasons changed. Mom's health had its ups and downs, but the equipment kept her stable. The generator stood ready, tested regularly, maintained properly. Never needed an emergency again, but always there just in case. Looking back on the whole experience now, a year later, I'm struck by how quickly things can spiral out of control when reasonable people stop being reasonable. Veronica wasn't evil. She was just a person who'd been given a small amount of power and had started to believe that power was more important than people. The HOA covenants weren't unreasonable on their face. They were just being enforced without wisdom or compassion. The entire conflict could have been avoided if someone had just asked a simple question: "Is this generator hurting anyone?" The answer was no. It was saving someone. Everything else was just noise. I learned important lessons from the experience. I learned to read contracts more carefully, even boring HOA covenants. I learned to document everything when conflicts arise. I learned that standing up to bullies is exhausting but necessary. I learned that most people are reasonable when given a chance to be, and that sometimes one person's courage to fight back can inspire others to join in. Most importantly, I learned that family comes first always. Rules and regulations have their place, but they should serve people, not the other way around. When a rule requires you to endanger someone's life, that rule is wrong and must be challenged. Mom passed away peacefully in her sleep the following spring, not from any medical crisis, but simply because she was old and her time had come. The equipment that had been the source of so much conflict had bought her an extra year and a half of life. Time we spent together making memories, talking about everything and nothing, just being together. That time was precious beyond measure. At her funeral, Tom and several other neighbors came to pay their respects. Even Veronica showed up, standing in the back, saying nothing, just being present. After the service, she approached me quietly. "I'm glad she had more time," Veronica said. "I'm glad your generator gave her that." I'm sorry for everything. I know, thank you for coming. She left, and I never saw her again. She and Michael sold their house and moved away that summer. I heard they'd relocated somewhere in Florida. I hoped they'd found peace. I still live in the same house in Plano. The generator is still in the backyard, still maintained, still ready. I don't need it for medical equipment anymore, but I keep it operational anyway. It's become a symbol of something to me, a reminder that sometimes you have to fight for what's right, even when everyone is telling you you're wrong. The neighborhood has thrived under the new HOA board. Property values have actually increased despite the more relaxed approach to enforcement. People feel more comfortable here, more at home. That's what a community should feel like. Sometimes I think about what would have happened if Officer Chen hadn't been reasonable that first morning during the ice storm. What if he demanded I turn off the generator? What if I'd been less prepared, less documented, less willing to fight? The alternatives are chilling to consider, but that's not what happened. I stood my ground, the law supported me, and justice eventually prevailed. It took months of stress and thousands of dollars in legal fees, but the principle was upheld. People matter more than rules, and life takes precedence over paperwork. I tell this story sometimes to friends and colleagues who are thinking about buying into HOA communities. It's not that HOAs are inherently bad. They can serve useful purposes when run by reasonable people. But they can also become instruments of petty tyranny when the wrong people gain control. Read the covenants carefully. Attend the meetings. Know who's in charge and how they exercise that authority. And most importantly, never let anyone tell you that rules matter more than doing what's right. The generator still hums occasionally in my backyard when I run it for maintenance. Every time I hear it, I think about Mom, about the fight I had to wage to keep her safe, about the community that eventually came together to support what was right. It's a good sound, that steady mechanical hum. It's the sound of being prepared, of standing firm, of refusing to let bureaucratic nonsense override human decency. And every time some new neighbor moves in and asks about it, I smile and tell them the whole story. They need to know what kind of neighborhood this is now, and what kind of neighborhood it used to be. They need to know that people here stood up when it mattered, that we chose community over control, that we remembered what HOAs are supposed to be for. The story has become something of a legend in the neighborhood, told and retold, growing slightly in the telling as these stories do. But the core truth remains. When pushed to choose between following arbitrary rules and doing what was necessary to save a life, I chose life. And when tested, the legal system backed that choice. That's the America I want to live in. One where common sense prevails over bureaucratic nonsense, where judges see through petty tyrants, where neighbors support each other when it counts. We don't always live up to that ideal, but sometimes in small ways in neighborhood disputes and local courtrooms, justice actually works the way it's supposed to. My generator stands ready in the backyard, a monument to that small victory for common sense and human decency. And every day I'm grateful for it, for the fight it represented, for the time it bought me with Mom, and for the lesson it taught me about standing up for what's right even when the whole world seems determined to tell you you're wrong.